The Saturday afternoon charity martial arts exhibition had drawn far more people than the organizers expected. Families filled the bleachers, children waved foam fingers, local businesses sponsored booths around the gymnasium, and dozens of spectators held up their phones, ready to capture every exciting moment. The event was meant to raise money for a veteran support foundation, but most of the crowd had come for one reason: to see Damian Cross, the undefeated black belt whose highlight reels dominated social media. Damian had built a reputation not only for his incredible skill but also for his ruthless confidence. Every match ended the same way. He defeated his opponent with flawless technique, then entertained his online followers by mocking them afterward. Millions watched his clips, where ordinary challengers left the mat embarrassed while Damian smiled for the camera. To his fans, it was confidence. To others, it looked like arrogance. As the announcer introduced him, the audience erupted into cheers. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer shouted, "give it up for the undefeated champion, Damian Cross." Damian raised both arms, soaking in the applause as flashes from cameras lit up the gym. He bowed dramatically before pacing around the mat with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. After finishing an exhibition match in less than a minute, Damian grabbed a microphone. "Who's next?" he asked with a grin. "Surely someone here thinks they can do better." The crowd laughed, expecting another volunteer to step forward. Near the back row, however, sat a man who barely seemed to notice the excitement. Jack Turner wore faded blue jeans, worn leather boots, and a weathered denim jacket with the logo of a trucking company stitched over one pocket. His face carried the lines of long days on the road, and a half-finished cup of coffee rested beside him. He had stopped in town after delivering medical supplies and bought a ticket simply because the event supported veterans. He had no interest in attention. He only wanted a quiet afternoon before continuing his route. Damian's eyes scanned the audience until they settled on Jack. "There we go," Damian said, pointing directly toward him. "Our next challenger." Several cameras immediately turned toward the truck driver. Jack looked around, almost expecting Damian to be pointing at someone else. "Me?" he asked politely. Damian nodded. "Yeah, you. Come on. Unless truck drivers only know how to wrestle steering wheels." The audience chuckled. Some people shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether the joke had gone too far. Jack smiled politely and shook his head. "I appreciate the invitation," he replied calmly. "But I'm just here to watch." Instead of letting it go, Damian continued. "What happened? Too scared? Or are those boots too heavy for the mat?" The crowd laughed louder, encouraged by Damian's confidence. A teenage spectator began recording, whispering excitedly, "This is going viral." Jack simply took another sip of coffee. Across the gym, an elderly volunteer carrying donation boxes accidentally stepped near the edge of the mat. Irritated by the interruption, Damian brushed the older man aside without much thought. The volunteer stumbled, nearly falling before Jack instinctively rose from his seat and caught him by the arm. "You all right?" Jack asked gently. The elderly man nodded with gratitude. Before Jack sat back down, the sleeve of his jacket slid upward just enough to reveal part of an old military tattoo and several faded scars stretching across his forearm. An older veteran sitting a few rows away noticed them instantly. His cheerful expression disappeared. His eyes widened as memories from decades earlier came rushing back. "No," he whispered under his breath. "It can't be him." He leaned forward, staring more carefully at Jack's calm posture, the quiet confidence in the way he stood, and the unmistakable balance that only years of elite training could create. The veteran quickly tried to get the attention of one of the event organizers. "You need to stop this," he said urgently. The organizer frowned. "Stop what?" Before the veteran could answer, Damian stepped closer to Jack with the microphone still in his hand. "So what's it going to be?" Damian asked. "Walk away, or prove me wrong." Jack looked at the elderly volunteer he had just helped, then back at the smiling champion. His voice remained calm, almost gentle. "You've already won enough today." Damien smirked, mistaking kindness for fear. "Then prove it." The entire gymnasium fell silent as Jack slowly removed his denim jacket and folded it neatly over his chair. No anger crossed his face. No determination flashed in his eyes. He simply walked toward the center of the mat with the quiet composure of a man who had faced far greater challenges than an arrogant fighter. In the stands, the old veteran lowered his head and sighed. They have absolutely no idea who they're challenging. The referee stepped forward, preparing to begin the unexpected match, while hundreds of phones recorded the moment that was about to change everyone's understanding of what true strength really looked like. That a hushed silence settled over the gym as Jack Turner stepped onto the mat. The cheers that had filled the building moments earlier faded into curious whispers. Most people expected the match to be over in seconds. To them, the middle-aged truck driver standing across from an undefeated martial arts champion looked hopelessly outmatched. Jack stood calmly with his hands relaxed at his sides. There was no fighting stance, no attempt to intimidate, and no sign of nervousness. His breathing remained slow and steady, as though he were waiting for a traffic light to change rather than preparing for a public challenge. Damien Cross circled him with a confident smile. "You still have time to walk away," Damien said loudly enough for the audience to hear. "I don't want anyone saying I picked on an old truck driver." A few people laughed. Jack simply nodded. "I'm not worried about that." The simplicity of his reply irritated Damien even more. He was used to fear, excuses, or angry responses. Calmness was something he didn't know how to handle. As Jack rolled up the sleeves of his flannel shirt, more of the faded scars along his forearms became visible. They weren't fresh injuries or ordinary work cuts. Long, thin marks crossed his skin in different directions, telling stories no one in the room could read. Across the gym, the elderly veteran who had recognized the tattoo pushed through the crowd, trying to reach the organizers. "You have to stop this match," he insisted. One official looked confused. "Why?" The truck driver agreed. The veteran shook his head. "You don't understand. That man isn't just some truck driver." "Then who is he?" The veteran hesitated, glancing toward Jack. "If I'm right, his name is Commander Jack Turner." The official frowned. "I've never heard of him." "That's because men like him weren't meant to be famous." The words lingered in the air, but before the veteran could explain further, the referee called both men to the center of the mat. While the crowd waited, Jack's thoughts drifted far away from the noisy gym. For just a moment, he wasn't standing on polished wooden flooring anymore. He was back on a moonless coastline years earlier. Cold waves crashed against black rocks as a team of Navy SEALs silently emerged from the water. Every movement was precise. Every breath was controlled. Jack had walked at the front. Not because he wanted recognition, but because a leader always accepted the greatest risk. He remembered signaling his team through darkness, guiding them past enemy patrols with nothing but hand gestures. He remembered carrying an injured teammate for nearly 2 miles after an explosion, refusing to leave anyone behind. He remembered the helicopter lifting off while one empty seat remained, a reminder that not everyone had made it home. The flashback disappeared as quickly as it came. Jack blinked once and returned to the present. No one in the audience knew those memories still visited him almost every night. After retiring from military service, he had quietly turned down television interviews, book deals, and speaking tours. He packed away his medals inside an old metal toolbox in his garage and chose a different life. Driving trucks across America gave him something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. The endless highways demanded patience instead of violence. Sunrises over open roads replaced battlefields. Delivering food, medicine, and supplies to communities felt like another kind of service, one that didn't require carrying a weapon. His neighbors knew him only as Jack, the friendly truck driver. Children along his delivery route waved whenever his blue semi rolled into town. His daughter, Emily, had grown up believing her father was simply a hard-working man who loved long drives and terrible roadside coffee. He had never burdened her with stories of war. To her, he was just Dad, the man who never missed a birthday, always fixed broken bicycles, and somehow remained calm no matter what happened. Back inside the gym, Damien bounced lightly on his feet, throwing playful practice punches into the air. "Hope you're ready," he said with a grin. Jack smiled politely. "I've been ready for a long time." Damien mistook the answer for empty confidence. The audience leaned forward in anticipation. The veteran, however, slowly removed his old military cap and held it against his chest. He wasn't worried about Jack. He was worried about what Damien was about to learn. The referee raised one hand and looked at both men. "Remember," he said firmly, "this is a friendly exhibition. Fight with control and respect." Jack nodded. "So will I." Damien only smirked, convinced another easy victory was seconds away. The referee looked between them one final time. "Fighters." He lowered his hand. "Begin." The first move belonged to Damien, but before anyone could blink, the crowd was about to witness a level of discipline and skill unlike anything they had ever seen. The referee's hand sliced through the air. "Fight!" The crowd erupted into cheers as Damien Cross exploded forward with the confidence of a man who had never tasted defeat. Cameras rose higher above the audience, every phone recording what everyone expected would become another viral clip. Online viewers flooded the live stream with comments predicting another effortless victory for the undefeated black belt. Damien wasted no time. He opened with a lightning-fast spinning kick aimed at Jack Turner's head, the same move that had ended countless exhibition matches. The attack was fast, powerful, and perfectly executed. But Jack wasn't there. With the slightest shift of his weight, he stepped just inches to the side. The kick sliced through empty air. A murmur spread across the gym. Damien landed smoothly and smiled. "Lucky." He fired a quick jab followed by a sharp elbow strike. Again, Jack moved. No panic. No wasted motion. He simply leaned back at precisely the right moment, allowing Damien's fist to stop less than an inch from his face before calmly taking another step to the side. The audience grew quieter. Most people had never seen anyone avoid attacks with such effortless precision. It didn't look like Jack was reacting. It looked as though he already knew where every strike would land. Damien frowned. His smile began to disappear. He launched another combination, 3 punches, a knee strike, and a roundhouse kick delivered with incredible speed. Jack evaded every one of them. His boots barely seemed to leave the mat. His breathing never changed. His expression remained calm, almost thoughtful, as though he were studying Damien rather than fighting him. The silence inside the gym became almost uncomfortable. One little boy tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, "why isn't the truck driver hitting him?" His father didn't answer. He couldn't. Across the room, the elderly veteran folded his arms and nodded quietly. "That's exactly how he always fought," he murmured. "He never wasted energy." Damien's frustration boiled over. "No one embarrasses me," he shouted. Ignoring the referee's warning to stay composed, he charged recklessly, throwing everything he had into one overwhelming attack. Punches flew from every angle. His feet moved faster than ever, each strike fueled by anger instead of discipline. The audience watched in stunned silence. Then it happened. Jack moved for the first time. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Simply, perfectly. As Damien lunged forward, Jack gently caught his wrist, stepped to the side, and used Damien's own momentum against him. One smooth movement flowed into another with almost graceful precision. Damien's balance disappeared. His feet left the ground. A heartbeat later, the undefeated champion slammed onto the mat with a loud thud. The entire gym froze. No one cheered. No one spoke. Even the live stream comments seemed to pause. Damien stared at the ceiling, confused. What? He had trained for over 20 years. He had fought national champions. He had defeated professional competitors. No one had ever thrown him so effortlessly. Embarrassed, Damien scrambled back to his feet before anyone could help him. His face burned with anger. Again. The referee hesitated. You can stop if I said again. Without waiting for permission, Damien rushed forward even faster than before. This time he abandoned technique completely. He swung wildly, determined to land a single clean hit. Jack sighed softly. I don't want to hurt you. Damien answered with another punch. Jack stepped inside the attack. In one fluid motion, he redirected Damien's arm, turned behind him, and gently applied a controlled shoulder lock. Within seconds, Damien found himself kneeling on one knee, unable to move. There was no pain. Only complete control. Jack applied just enough pressure to keep him still. Nothing more. The referee immediately stepped between them. Stop. Match over. Jack released the hold instantly and took 3 respectful steps backward. He even offered Damien a hand. For several long seconds, Damien simply stared at it. The same crowd that had cheered his every victory now watched in complete silence. No celebration came from Jack. No raised fists. No smile of triumph. He merely waited. Finally, Damien accepted the hand and stood. At that exact moment, the elderly veteran slowly removed his cap and raised it in a quiet salute. Several other older men in different parts of the gym stood and did the same. Some had tears in their eyes. They weren't applauding the victory. They were honoring the man who had just shown the discipline, restraint, and humility they remembered from decades earlier. Meanwhile, phones across the arena buzzed with notifications. One spectator had searched the faded military tattoo visible on Jack's forearm. Another found an old photograph from a veterans museum. A grainy image showed a much younger Jack standing beside members of an elite Navy SEAL unit after a successful rescue mission. Beneath the photograph were the words. Commander Jack Turner. Team Leader. United States Navy SEALs. Gasps echoed through the gym. People looked from the photograph back to the quiet truck driver standing on the mat. The pieces finally began to fit together. The ordinary man in worn boots. The calm smile. The scars. The effortless movements. He had never been an ordinary truck driver. He was a decorated warrior who had spent years leading one of the world's most elite special operations teams, and he had defeated an undefeated champion without throwing a single punch. As whispers spread through the crowd, Damien lowered his head, realizing that the greatest fighter he had ever faced had never wanted to fight at all. For several long seconds after the referee declared the match over, no one moved. The silence inside the gymnasium felt heavier than the loudest applause. Hundreds of spectators stared at the quiet truck driver standing in the center of the mat. Jack Turner simply buttoned the cuff of his flannel shirt, picked up his faded denim jacket, and prepared to leave as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Meanwhile, the silence finally broke. It says he was a Navy SEAL. No way. Look at this picture. People pulled out their phones, searching frantically. Within minutes, old photographs, archived newspaper articles, and veterans' websites began appearing on their screens. The grainy images showed a younger Jack in camouflage, standing beside helicopters, rescue teams, and fellow SEAL operators. His name wasn't famous, but among military circles it carried enormous respect. The elderly veteran slowly walked toward the center of the mat. His eyes glistened with emotion. When he reached Jack, he stood perfectly straight and raised his trembling hand in a formal salute. Without hesitation, Jack returned the salute. The gym fell silent once again. "You remember me?" the veteran asked softly. Jack studied his face for a moment before smiling. "Corporal Henry Lawson." The old man's eyes widened. You still remember. You carried me onto the evacuation helicopter after I was wounded, Jack replied. Some things aren't forgotten. Henry chuckled through watery eyes. I've spent 30 years wanting to thank you. Jack gently shook his head. We brought each other home. Those simple words carried more weight than any speech. Around them, several older men wearing veterans' caps slowly rose from their seats. One after another, they applauded, not with excitement, but with quiet respect. Soon the applause spread throughout the entire gym until every person in the audience was standing. Jack looked uncomfortable. He had never enjoyed being the center of attention. Damien watched everything unfold from the edge of the mat. Only minutes earlier he had expected another viral victory. Instead, he found himself watching complete strangers honor the very man he had mocked. An event organizer hurried over carrying a tablet. Mr. Turner, she said, the local news station wants to interview you immediately. Jack smiled politely. No, thank you. What about a national network? They're already calling. I'm just passing through town. But people deserve to hear your story. Jack looked around the gym before answering. No. He pointed toward the large banner hanging above the stage. The words read, Supporting America's Veterans. Today isn't about me, Jack said quietly. It's about the men and women who never got the chance to come home. The room became silent once again. Even the reporters lowered their cameras. Henry Lawson nodded proudly. That's exactly why he was the best leader I ever served under. Another veteran stepped forward. I remember reading about Commander Turner after Operation Silent Tide, he said. They said he volunteered for the rescue mission when everyone else believed it couldn't be done. Jack smiled faintly. There were 12 of us. The veteran nodded. But only 9 came home. Jack's smile slowly disappeared. He lowered his eyes. They're the heroes. No one spoke. For the first time that afternoon, the crowd understood why the truck driver had never bragged about his past. Every medal represented friends he could no longer call. Every victory carried memories of sacrifice. Across the gym, Damien slowly removed his black belt and stared at it in silence. The belt had always represented success to him. Now it suddenly felt empty. He walked toward Jack, stopping a few feet away. I owe you an apology, Damien said quietly. Jack looked at him without judgment. I mocked you because I thought I was stronger. Jack smiled kindly. No. Damien frowned. You were trying to convince everyone, including yourself, that you were. The word struck Damien harder than any technique on the mat. He replayed every embarrassing video he had posted online. Every beginner he had laughed at. Every volunteer he had humiliated for views. Every victory suddenly looked different. I've spent years chasing respect, Damien admitted. Jack shook his head. Respect isn't something you demand. He glanced toward the elderly volunteer Damien had shoved earlier. It's something you give. Damien followed Jack's gaze. The older volunteer was smiling despite everything that had happened. Ashamed, Damien walked over and offered his hand. I'm sorry, he said sincerely. The elderly man accepted it with a warm smile. Then you've already taken the first step. Jack quietly slipped on his denim jacket. Without another word, he picked up the keys to his 18-wheeler and headed toward the exit. Several reporters called after him. Commander Turner. What was your toughest mission? Can we interview you for just 5 minutes? Jack never stopped walking. Outside, the evening sun reflected off the polished chrome of his truck. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and slowly pulled onto the highway, disappearing into the fading light as quietly as he had arrived. Inside the gym, no one watched the road anymore. They watched Damien. For the first time in his undefeated career, the champion had lost far more than a match. He had lost his pride, and in its place, he had found humility. As the sound of Jack's truck faded into the distance, Damien made a silent promise to himself. The next time people spoke his name, it would not be because he had embarrassed someone. It would be because he had learned what true strength really meant. 3 days after the exhibition match, the internet was still talking about the mysterious truck driver who had effortlessly defeated an undefeated black belt without throwing a single punch. The original video had been viewed more than 20 million times. Thousands of reaction channels replayed the footage frame by frame, amazed by Jack Turner's calm movements and incredible control. Veterans commented with quiet pride, martial artists praised his discipline, and viewers everywhere repeated the same question. Who is Commander Jack Turner? Yet despite the sudden attention, no one could find him. His social media accounts didn't exist. He gave no interviews. He accepted no television invitations. To the media, he had disappeared as quickly as he had appeared. The only clue was a photograph taken at sunrise by another truck driver. It showed Jack's blue 18-wheeler parked outside a small roadside diner somewhere along an interstate highway. While the world searched for him, Jack continued living exactly as he always had. He delivered food to rural grocery stores. He hauled medical equipment to hospitals. He transported emergency supplies to towns recovering from severe storms. At every stop, he greeted people with the same quiet smile. Most never realized the man helping unload pallets had once led one of the world's most elite military teams. For Jack, that was exactly how he wanted it. Meanwhile, Damien Cross sat alone inside his martial arts academy long after his students had gone home. The championship trophies lining the shelves no longer filled him with pride. Instead, they reminded him of every person he had defeated simply to make himself look stronger. He opened his laptop. For nearly an hour, he stared at a blank screen. Finally, he pressed the record button. The camera light turned red. "My name is Damien Cross," he began quietly. "And for years, I've mistaken victory for greatness." He took a deep breath. "A few days ago, I publicly challenged a man because I judged him by his clothes instead of his character. I mocked someone who had done more for others than I could ever imagine." His voice grew heavier. "I owe an apology to Jack Turner, to the elderly volunteer I disrespected, to every opponent I embarrassed for entertainment, and to everyone who believed arrogance was confidence because I showed them that example." He looked directly into the camera. Real strength doesn't humiliate people. It protects them. Real confidence doesn't need applause. It earns respect through humility. When Damien uploaded the video, millions expected excuses. Instead, they watched genuine accountability. The response surprised everyone. Former critics praised his honesty. Parents shared the video with their children. Martial arts schools across the country began discussing not only technique but also respect, discipline, and character. Months passed. Damien transformed his academy from the inside out. The walls that once displayed only championship photographs now featured portraits of firefighters, teachers, nurses, first responders, military veterans, and ordinary people who served their communities without asking for recognition. Every new student heard the same lesson before learning their first punch. "A black belt isn't proof that you're better than someone else," Damien would say. "It's proof that you're responsible for protecting people who can't protect themselves." Students who mocked beginners were asked to help teach them instead. Winning tournaments remained important, but kindness became mandatory. One autumn afternoon, Damien received a small package with no return address. Inside was an old photograph. It showed a dusty blue truck parked beside an empty highway at sunrise. On the back, written in neat handwriting, were only 2 lines. "The strongest person in the room is usually the one who never has to prove it. Jack." Damien quietly framed the photograph and hung it at the entrance of his academy. Every student stopped to read those words before stepping onto the mat. Years later, visitors often asked why there were no pictures of Damien's championship victories near the entrance. He would simply point toward the photograph of the lonely truck. Because that's where the most important lesson in this school began. Hundreds of miles away, Jack Turner continued driving America's highways. One cold morning, he pulled into another small-town diner for breakfast. As he walked toward the entrance, a young truck driver hurried over. "Sir, are you Jack Turner?" Jack smiled politely. "I am." The young man looked nervous. "My son saw the video. He used to think being tough meant fighting everyone. Now he volunteers at our local veterans center every Saturday." Jack's eyes softened. "I'm glad to hear that." The young father extended his hand. "Thank you." Jack shook it firmly. "You don't need to thank me." He glanced toward the little boy waiting beside the truck. "Just teach him that courage is measured by how you treat people." The father nodded. "I will." Jack entered the diner, ordered his usual coffee, and sat by the window overlooking the highway. Outside, hundreds of vehicles rushed toward their destinations, unaware that one of the nation's quietest heroes was sitting among them. He preferred it that way. His greatest victories had never been about defeating an enemy. They had always been about serving others. As the morning sun climbed above the horizon, Jack climbed back into his truck, started the engine, and continued down the endless highway. No cameras followed him. No reporters waited. No crowd applauded. But somewhere behind him, one humble champion, hundreds of inspired students, and millions of viewers had learned a lesson they would never forget. True strength is not measured by the battles you win. It is measured by the lives you lift, the respect you show, and the humility you carry long after the applause has faded.